I thought I'd start by showing you a very simple template. It's right here. This is a free function, and you can declare and define a function all in once as long as the whole thing is before you use it. I could have made a header called utility.h in which I declared this function, and a CPP file in which I implemented it, but especially for templates, we tend to do it all at once in the include, and rather than have a separate file, which the include statement would have just plunked right here, I decided to simply put the contents here. You can see the structure of it. If it wasn't for this first line, it would just look like declaring and defining a function. We have a function called max that returns something called t, and it takes t references. If you're thinking, wait, we covered all the types, int, float, what is t? T is a placeholder, and it's traditional to use the letter T for this placeholder, but you're by no means obliged to. You could use whatever you like. This line here says, I'm defining a template, and in my template there will be a placeholder for a class, and despite the word class, you can also put fundamental types like ints and things in here, which I'm going to now refer to for the rest of the time as T. So this says, whatever this is a template of, if it's a template of ints, I mean int. If it's a template of person objects, I mean person. That's what this function returns. Its name is max. It takes a t reference, which I'm going to call t1, and another t reference, which I'm going to call t2. And we're using the immediate if, and if t1 is less than t2, we'll return t2, otherwise we'll return t1. So in other words, if it's a tie, we'll return t1. If it's not a tie, we'll return whoever's bigger, using the less than operator. It's hard to imagine a simpler function to write once you've really grasped the immediate if you're done with the difficulty level of this function, but it's really pretty powerful. In fact, I should point out there's a better implementation of max in the standard library, and we're only showing you max so that you have something to look at and to understand. I'm going to use it. Change my boundaries a little so you can see this whole line. I'm going to print out max of 33 and 44 is, and then I'm going to call the function passing in 33 and 44. And the compiler's pretty smart. It says, hey, those are integers. You must want the version of max that works with integers. And it'll use that one and return an integer that I can send to cout. Then I set up a couple of strings, and I want to print out the max of them. And again, I just say max of S1, S2, and the compiler says, well, if you want to pass it a pair of strings, you must mean the one that takes strings and returns a string. And I can even work with person objects. Here I'm going to print out p1.getName and p2.getName just so that I have something to put on the screen, but I'm actually determining the max of p1 and p2. And that returns a person. So on a person, I can use the dot operator and call one of its member functions, and that's how I can get somebody's name. So I'm going to run this application and let you see the output. You can see that the max of 33 and 44 is 44. That fits what we know about numbers. That the max of hello and world is world. If you think about sorting, W coming after H in the alphabet, okay, that makes sense. And the max of Kate Gregory and someone else is someone else. Now, in order to test if that's right or not, you have to remember how we defined operator less than for person. Come back and take a look in person. Here's operator less than. We compare their arbitrary numbers. Right, so if one person is less than another, if their arbitrary number is less than the other. And the two arbitrary people I made here, Kate Gregory and someone else had a number of 4, 5, 6, so that's why they were the bigger. This is just kind of intuitive and easy to understand. You're just calling max, max of two strings, max of two numbers, max of two person objects. There is a potential problem. I've got an include here of bankaccount.h. And I'll just open that up and show you this is a half-written bank account class. We're not going to design or write it. What you need to know about the bank account class in its current unfinished state, it doesn't have an operator less than. Person has an operator less than, which we discussed in operator overloading, and you've just seen the code for. Bank account does not. If I try to do the same behavior with bank accounts as I've been doing with integers, strings, and persons, I don't get the kind of delightful error messages that I would like to get. I have to tell you, when you're working with templates, sometimes the error messages can be a little opaque. So here is some code that creates two bank accounts and tries to call the max of B1 and B2. Let's see what happens when I compile this. I'm just using the keystrokes to build it. So it failed, and the error is no operator found, which takes a left-hand type operand of type bank account. That's not bad. It's even telling me that the problem is here with the less than. But you'd be tempted to go and say, well, I'm not calling less than. I don't understand what the problem is. You kind of need to know that max uses less than. And that by calling max, you're trying to use less than, and you don't have one. You don't really get a good error message saying, you don't implement the right stuff to use this template. The burden is all on you as the person who wants to use the template. In this case, a bank account developer who wants to use Max needs to know what that imposes on bank account. By reading the documentation, if all else fails, maybe by reading the code and looking at it and saying, oh, I see it uses operator less than, or it uses operator plus, or it uses a member function called compare, or whatever it uses. And if for some reason you have neither documentation nor code, by getting error messages from the compiler. Bank account's not eligible to work with Max. It just is missing the operators that it needs to work with Max. And that's okay. You have to find another way to compare bank accounts, or you can write the operator that's missing for bank accounts. But understanding that nobody's going to check for you explicitly. You'll get errors, and eventually you'll figure out what causes the errors, but nobody's going to explicitly check whether a particular type is okay for use with a particular template or not. That's your job as the developer.